Hi, my name is Cody Derby, and today's lecture and discussion is going to be about LGBTQ inclusion initiative training. So, for my training, I'm going to basically give like a lecture in a discussion-based format, and that's going to be today's discussion on how we can involve LGBTQ population and into the workplace, and how we can be very inclusive of that community. So, kind of just to introduce myself, my name is Cody Derby. I'm an athletic trainer at Detroit Tigers organization, and as a member of the LGBTQ community, I feel very strongly about this subject, and it is my duty to get my word out there and help others be cognizant and aware of their surroundings, and hopefully take that next step in being a more inclusive community and more inclusive environment to work in and be a part of as an organization. So, kind of just the introduction. The purpose of this training is really just to provide information to athletes and staff and to deal with the LGBT community and kind of understand the whole meaning behind it and how we can adapt to it. So as professionals, it's really our importance to be aware of our surroundings and be able to provide that help when needed and to recognize when situations are not up to par and be able to adapt and adjust to how that can go. So many people have encountered a situation with a member of the community, and some haven't. And so I kind of want to look at both sides and determine where we can go from this side and how we can help the other side as well. And so this training is really just to provide that education and awareness for everyone here today. The focus is to engage all players and staff and to really just to create a positive environment for everyone in a professional manner. So inclusion is something that every organization strives for, but it's really those organizations that take that next step, make that big difference for everyone else. So diversity and inclusion trainings happen all the time, but for us, I really want to dive into the LGBTQ population and see how we can further adapt and change that in the game of baseball and even further on. So just a little bit of the background. It happens in every setting, but the importance of educating and providing resources is probably the first step that you want to take in providing inclusion for the LGBTQ community. And focusing on the importance of inclusion within the community will allow us to better understand the community itself and help us become better allies, for lack of better terms. So another important aspect I want to kind of touch on today in our training session deals with the importance of mental health and the stability of people in an organization that might be within the LGBT community that are going through a mental health struggle, and how we can further understand that that's a big cause of why mental health is a thing. It's because people aren't comfortable in their surroundings and their situations that they work in. So the sensitivity surrounding this topic can sometimes be overwhelming, and for me in my training session today, I really want to provide a sensitivity approach, but I don't want it to be something that's going to be overwhelming where we have to watch everything we say and anything like that. So really I just want to provide the opportunity for education and hopefully have all of you leave here today knowing a little bit more about the LGBT community and kind of going on from there. So the value of this training is really to reach out to everyone and knowing that someone may deal with an interaction with an LGBTQ community member and how we can go about approaching that. And we believe that in understanding the importance of inclusion is going to create that more positive environment and a better approach to you dealing with a person of the LGBT community and how you can go about that. So the following list that we kind of want to go over is really just the base for our value of training. So really just understand each identification of the community. Really understand what LGBTQ plus means. Learn about the negative and positive language, what not to say, when to say something, what's not appropriate. Maybe you're not being aware of what you're actually saying and you don't really mean it, but how we can kind of take a better approach with that. Develop an understanding for a non-inclusive environment. Create ways to establish a positive environment. Really challenge our awareness in our surroundings and really kind of open up our minds to be like, wow, that I may have been saying something like that, but really approaching it in a different way. And really just knowing the limits of sensitivity. So like I kind of mentioned, this is the touchy subject, and a lot of people might get offended, or some people might not want to be involved as much, but really just kind of knowing our boundaries and where we can set it. So that the kind of breakdown of our task analysis, like really what we want to come out of this is inclusion for the LGBT community is our number one priority, and that's exactly what we're here for today. And so between the education I'm providing you today and the knowledge that we're giving you, and really just learning about the language and kind of how to put that on a minuscule scale of what not to say, what's appropriate, and that's it. Breaking those two categories down even further is really just going to come with respect, inclusion, and acceptance. that's really all we're trying to get out of this training today. So really, it's not something that I'm teaching you. I really just want it to be like a lecture, but at the same time, I think that this is a training session for everyone in general, because this is something that everyone needs to go through. And I think for us and our organization, we really want to strive to be better at being an inclusive environment and really trying to narrow it down on the LGBT community itself. So let's just break it down into kind of how we're going to start this lecture off real quick. So really, everyone's first question is, what does LGBTQ mean? And so let's break it down by the letters and the acronyms for you guys to get a better understanding of where we're at today. So we'll break it down just like this in terms of, what the community means, language, what to use, what not to use, kind of some biased opinions. We'll talk about kind of the ignorance awareness kind of policy that we want to approach in terms of, you might not agree with someone, but let's just be accepting of them, and let's, have quality values of being in a professional setting. And we'll kind of end with some scenarios and, some cases that you might approach, and we can have a discussion based about that and determine, what that next step is in terms of, I see this or I might see this, how can I approach it? So we'll kind of go through all the education, and at that last point, we'll do a scenario to kind of see how we feel about it, and then if we're open for discussion as well. So that will kind of be the overall adjusting part of our training session here today. So the acronym LGBTQ+. So L is for lesbian, a female that is attracted to another female. G, gay, a male that is attracted to another male. Bisexual, a male or female who is attracted to someone who is male or female. Transgender, someone whose gender identity is incongruent with their sex assigned at birth. And Q can mean two different things, questioning and queer. Questioning is someone who is developing or trying to understand their sexual orientation or sexual identity. And queer, a sexual orientation like pansexual, a more fluid sexual orientation or attraction. So those are the letters that we use to define our community as a whole. So when we say LGBTQ+, that's what we mean by those acronyms, but it's also more of what we see more in the community and what people identify with more as in general. So really that's kind of like the bigger part of the community itself, but we'll talk about in a minute. There's a lot more that goes into the plus sign of the acronym. So it used to just be LGBT or LGB, and a lot of people used to understand it as LGBT, LGB, that kind of thing, but as we have adopted a more progressive community, I think that we've come to the conclusion of LGBTQ+. So LGBTQ is what we see a lot. Plus is those people that are still within our community, but people aren't going to relate to as much in terms of what we're trying to get our message out. So the plus. So the P is pansexual, similar to bisexual, yet attracted is not limited to cisgender persons. So attraction can be all expressions or identities. A, two things. Ally, someone who supports the LGBTQ+ community. So, for example, a person who identifies as being straight can be an ally, or anyone within the community is still within an ally of being an LGBTQ member. A, asexual, a person who does not experience sexual attraction towards anyone. I, intersex, between sexes. So this refers to a person's sex that was assigned at birth but does not traditionally match what they're going through in life. And intergender, gender queer, gender nonconforming, those who are really not fitting to really male or female actions. Some things you might see like he's more masculine or she's really feminine. So those things really don't apply to someone who feels queer. They do things that are feminine, they do things that are masculine. So that kind of just eliminates those two borders and brings them together. So I talked a little bit about gender expression and gender identity. So really right now I just kind of want to open it up to questions on terms of what you think gender expression is and what you think gender identity is and kind of what the difference is. So let's talk about it for a sec and then we'll come back. So gender expression, the way that one displays their gender and gender identity. So how they go about their daily lives is their gender expression, okay? So someone who is expressing themselves in a more masculine way and someone who expresses themselves in a more feminine way that is their gender expression. So these kind of things can be shown through clothes, hairstyles, hobbies, interest, sometimes even careers, okay? So those gender expressions can also be taken back a little bit. So for example, someone who works in a more masculine dominant career or a more male dominant career, and someone who identifies within the LGBT community is probably going to take back their expression a little in a different way than you would see if someone who feels more comfortable in that setting. So gender expression is really just how you go about your daily life. Gender identity is truly how you identify yourself. So a gay man is going to identify as a gay man, but their gender expression may be something else in what they identify as. If that makes sense, then we can talk about it. Sexual orientation. So this term really just defines you as what you're attracted to. So everyone has a sexual orientation and everyone has a sexual identity. Everyone has this because of what they feel fits them best, okay? So some common misconceptions that we really want to avoid, and we'll talk about this in a minute too, is sexual preference. So that saying right there, or that phrase, really just assumes that sexual orientation is easily changeable and is simply a characteristic of who they are. So kind of that next part of my training session is going to be talking about language. So leading up from that, let's talk about the do's and the don'ts, okay? So let's talk about the language of don't say that. Some things that we want to talk about, I'll kind of just touch on the big points as you'll see in my PowerPoint. But homosexual, using a gay as a noun, that's so gay. Sexual preference, like I had mentioned. Admitted that he was gay, a fag, a homo, queer, transgendered, tranny, transvestite, sex change operation. So this is kind of where the session gets a little touchy, because this is something where language is super important in our daily lives, and we feel that what we say can really hurt someone. So some of us have grown up hearing that that's so gay as a very common phrase in our vocabulary. And so, taking the offense to that is going to be on a wide spectrum with people within the LGBT community, but that's also something that we are not cognizant of saying when we say it. So as we all know, when we say that's so gay, we don't actually mean that that's homosexual. Now, if we do, that's a different approach to what we're trying to go at. But majority of the time, when someone says that phrase, we mean like that's dumb, that's weird, that's strange, that's not right, that's not appealing. Those kind of words and those phrases are what we're trying to say. But we've all grown up and we've been around the phrase of that's so gay because we all know what that's trying to imply. And it can imply a lot of different things, but it's grouping it into kind of one thing where we can use our own judgment in determining what that actually means. So language is huge, and I think that all of us in this room today have probably once either heard that phrase or said that phrase, and for myself included. And I think that for members of the community, it's a way of kind of protecting themselves and kind of like fitting in. And then for everyone else, like allies and people that aren't in our community, it's a way to just kind of show a lack of verbal knowledge and kind of an ignorance. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today and really just hone in on is just our language. Really being cognizant of our surroundings, because you might not know someone who is gay. You might know someone who is gay or within the LGBT community, working in baseball. And I think it's important that we establish that conscious of knowing our language and kind of taking it a step back and really thinking about what we're saying before we say it. Because you never know what could affect someone. So, talking about language, if there's any questions, let's kind of hone in on what we're trying to value here today with our training session, and kind of get some topics to talk about and that kind of thing. But if we don't have any questions, we're gonna move on to our scenarios. So this is kind of like that last part of the training session where we really want to focus in on how we can talk about this language. Now that we know a little bit more about the community itself and how we can kind of bring it together and go through something that you might approach. So scenario 1, a discussion is being taken place in the clubhouse and everyone's talking about a man that appeared in last night's music award show. People are commenting on things such as like, dude, did you see that queer's outfit? Bro, he looks so gay. Ah, what a homo. So in this context, these men are referring to this outfit on this man that they saw on TV to look dumb, or not appealing. So what are some ways that we can kind of change this commentary that you're hearing in the locker room? Let's talk about it. So some ways that we can kind of change it, as we kind of discussed, is, getting rid of that language. It's hard and it's funny to go about, but it's not right, because you don't know the person next to you in your locker. If their mom, dad, cousin, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa are within the LGBT community, they might know a friend that is, they might be, and they might not have identified themselves yet. So we have to be conscious about that. It doesn't matter where you are, in a public setting, in a clubhouse locker room, because let's face it, we work in baseball, and so we're going to hear that stuff, and we've heard it throughout the years. The whole saying of locker room talk is a huge discussion that's going on, and so this scenario right here kind of hits it home, and we talk about it all the time, and this is something that needs to be stopped. So let's take this approach and really think about what we're trying to say, and if you hear it, let's stop it. Let's stop it, because you don't know who's affected by this. Scenario 2. A player has been dealing with the stress, and you notice that he has been acting a lot different lately. Over the past week or so, he's been hearing comments such as gay, fag, homo. You ask him what's wrong, but he's timid to tell you. So this scenario, you notice someone's acting different, but you also don't know that they have been hearing those comments. So for him, he's been hearing these comments, but is afraid to approach anyone about it, and you just think that he's acting weird. So here are the questions. At this point, do you even consider if using derogatory language toward the LGBT community was even affecting him? So by you saying, the words like fag, homo, that's so gay, stuff like that, did you even realize that that was what's affecting him? Because if he doesn't approach you, you're probably not going to know. And if he doesn't approach you, what are you going to think is wrong? Is it something related to baseball? Is it something related to a topic that we've discussed? Is it something related to home life? Whatever. But is this something that's going to cross your mind? Maybe, maybe not. Let's follow up. If he tells you that the comments you have been making are offensive, what is that response? So he does come up to you and say, hey, I've heard you drop some language that is pretty offensive to me, or even not even me, just in the LGBT community in general. It's really not necessarily have to call himself out, but I'm taking it kind of offensively. What's your next step? Let's talk about it. So this isn't something that's going to be comfortable for everyone, and I feel that in today's world, we're going to be faced with a lot of different challenges, and so I think this next step, though, for us to be really inclusive in the LGBT community, we have to talk about language, and we have to be educated, because I can almost guarantee that not everyone in this room understands and knows what the LGBTQ plus stands for, not because they don't want to, just because they've never been given the opportunity to learn about it. So that was kind of my goal here today. I have an evaluation sheet that I'd like everyone to fill out in terms of, kind of just their background, and so I'll kind of just discuss it real quick, and then that'll be the end, and we'll kind of open it for give you guys some resources and kind of how to go about that. So some of the questions are, do you know anyone within your family that identifies as LGBTQ? Have you ever encountered an interaction with a member of the community? And the other ones kind of just talk about, like, how much knowledge did you know about this before this training? How strongly do you feel about inclusion? How comfortable do you feel when a person approaches you and is struggling to identify themselves? And kind of just, how you felt about today's discussion and training on what we can do to be better inclusive environment. So just to kind of wrap things up real quick, some resources that you guys can use. So if someone does approach you and, is wanting to, tell you their sexual orientation or tell you their sexual identity, but is in an uncomfortable setting, here are some resources you guys can give them to kind of further adapt and be able to overcome what you are struggling with and what they're struggling with as well. So GLAD is a program that really deals with a lot of that stuff. The Human Rights Campaign, the You Can Play Project, Athlete Ally, and the LGBTQ Florida Resources. So the Athlete Ally is really the biggest one we want to talk about, because this is something that's going toward inclusion in the collegiate settings and professional settings, and they're coming up with a software where we can give everyone the course and they can take it and kind of just like we're doing here today with kind of a training session and education-based development, and that's how we can kind of go about it. So if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to talk to you guys about it. And if you have any kind of other things you want to talk about that aren't necessarily in public, and you want to, kind of pull me aside and talk about it, I'm more than willing to talk about it and see where we can go from there. But thank you so much for your cooperation, and I will be passing around this sheet to do the evaluation. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.